No, that was just what was he doing? I was going to have him. Loki, could you talk into please one of the mics? Could you please talk into one of the mics? Hello, speak. That's better. That's better. But I don't know if. Was that okay? Was it okay or no? It's okay or no? Yes, okay. That's fine. I haven't done it for a long time, yeah. And I know Brian says, we want to try to put it onto YouTube, but I don't know how to do that. Yeah, do you know how to do that? Take a Facebook Live and make it into a YouTube video? Yeah. Okay. Okay, yeah. I didn't know that this was.
Good afternoon again. We're going to get started in about 7 minutes or so. Just quick logistics. The restrooms are in the parish hall, so you have to go back outside on the sidewalk and up into the parish hall. And the bathrooms are down the corridor to your left. Ask the candidates to take their seats to the front. For those that have questions, the phone number to call for the questions is 872-233-8422. That's 872 233-8422.
Kate, could you repeat that one more time, please?
It's 872-233-8422. And for those that are here, we have a microphone here, so if you have any questions, just walk up to the microphone. I didn't want to put the jam on. Go ahead, you got it. You got it. You got it before we start.
Shit.
House of Representatives is telling the people how to run the church. Right. Yeah, gotcha. Is that when you look at it, as far as this, some people are East Catholic, and an American. It's not the other way around. The old days, I was excommunication. They're not burned at the stake.
Yeah, we stay on this side. Yeah. We have time, we get time, yeah.
I was going to ask people not to do or drink in the sanctuary, but since our rector's passing out water, and this is
Get a cup.
all right, aloha and welcome to Good Shepherd Episcopal Church in Wailuku on the island of Maui, in Hawaii of Hawaii. I'm Gil Kitagaram, and I will be your moderator for this event. I'm a member of this parish. Thanks for coming and being engaged in this process. At this time, may I call up one of the transition committee chaplains, Father Nahoa Lucas, to offer the opening prayer to start off. Our Ke Aloha,
Aloha nui kako. Let's all bow our heads in prayer. Kuli kako e o moli kako. Komako maku e loko kalani ihi o e loko kako. Our most gracious and heavenly Father, you, the sacred Jehovah of the wars and the battles. Jehovah nani o mai kai ni maku ia oe. Kia kona kia ako koa na mai. Kia we humbly and prayerfully thank you for gathering us here today as one to listen to discern candidates who are to applying for the position of bishop here in our Hawaiʻi. You led your holy apostles to ordain ministers in every place, granted your church under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. May choose a suitable person for the ministry of the Word Sacrament as our next bishop, and uphold them, therefore, always in his approval, for the extension of your kingdom. Through him who is the shepherd, Bishop of our souls, Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
First, a little bit of introductions to some of the people that are here today. So with all the members present here today from the Bishop's Transition Committee, please stand and be recognized. Brian Schuster from Good Shepherd is here. Now let me call Father Mokihima, Rector of Good Shepherd Episcopal Church, to please stand and be recognized, and will all the members present at the church and also virtually, please stand and wave. Okay, will the Reverend Amy Crow, Vicar of Trinity by the Sea Episcopal Church and Holy Innocents, please stand and be recognized. Will all the members present and virtual, please stand and wave. So, Father George Wong, priest in charge of St. John's Episcopal Church, and anyone from St. John's that's here, please stand. And I understand we were scheduled to have some people from Grace Episcopal Church on Molokai to be here in person. Please stand. Is there anyone else that would like to be recognized? And I'm going to introduce the people here at the table, and this is in no particular order, but we'll start with the Reverend Elizabeth Libby Berman. She's the rector of the Church of the Holy Nativity in Wildlife on Oahu. She's joined today by her husband, Mark. Will you both please stand and recognize? Thank you, Lord, for the next, the Reverend Canon Andrew J. Arakawa serves as the Canon for Ministry Formation and Dean of Waiolae Hui Center for Ministry, and as a lower school chaplain in Iolani School in Honolulu. He is joined today with his wife, Kim. Please will you both stand to be recognized. Thank you for the And then the Reverend Timothy J. Yanni, the rector at St. John the Baptist in Phoenix, Arizona. He previously served as associate rector at All Saints Episcopal Church and Day School in Phoenix. He is here with his wife, Brandon. Please will you both stand and be recognized. Now, the main purpose for this Kealoha Kako meet and greet session is for each of you to get to meet the most out of each participant that has made the time to come here and share your story with all of you. Questions should be relevant to the job you're applying for as the 6th Bishop of the Diocese of Hawaii, Guam, and Saipan. If a question is asked that has nothing to do with why we're here today, we will ask you to sit and we will note your question and forward it to the powers that be, and they will get back to you. Again, we have a mic here, but we also have a phone number for those who are not here to call. That number again is 872-233-8422. Now, some little bit of rules of the road here. We will have some rules of conduct that were created by the transition team, keeping in mind how we want to be treated by everyone here. The code of conduct, or kapulova, for all participants, including candidates. Professionalism and huihi respect. All participants must treat speakers and other attendees with courtesy. Harassment, personal attacks, or disparaging remarks, verbal, visual, or physical, will not be tolerated. Relevance, Wi-Fi. Questions should be relevant to the topic being presented to maximize efficiency and to respect everyone's time. Conciseness, Filipono. Questions should be asked concisely to allow for as many questions as possible during the designated session. Prohibition of harassment and discrimination. Living aloha. The Q&A session must be a safe space free from harassment based on race, gender, religion, disability, or other protected characteristics. No retaliation. Aohi Panai. Attendees are encouraged to ask questions, and any participant who brings forward concerns about inappropriate conduct during a session will be protected from retaliation. And finally, confidentiality. Participants must respect the confidentiality of sensitive information shared during the session and avoid sharing it externally. We also have some rules regarding this event. Start on time, which we did. When you do come up to ask a question, please give us your name, your affiliation, what church you're from, and then your question. We're asking each participant to ask 2 questions per location, unless we'd like to give everyone an opportunity to ask a question. So, unless there's no other questioners, we'd like you to try to limit yourself to 2 questions. And we'll have a timekeeper who will try to limit the time you spend in each question. So at this time now, we're going to ask each of our 3 candidates to take 5 minutes to provide an introduction of themselves and what they want us to know about themselves and who they are and why they applied and where and when they plan to take this diocese and how they plan to do this. So each candidate will have 5 minutes to share, and we will have a timekeeper up front, and we'll let you know when you have 2 minutes left, 1 minute left, and finally to wrap up. Are there any questions? I guess you guys have been through this once already. Are there any questions about that process? If none, we'll go from my left to Mother Libby. Go ahead.
Hello, my friends. Testing one.
It's you sort of need to keep them in front of you. We have
Testing one.
it's a new system, so you
How's
sort of
that? All
you can't
right.
sort of move your head.
Good.
Our record is definitely
Good afternoon, everyone. It's wonderful to be here, and I'm glad to share a little bit about myself and a little bit about the work I have been doing.
Yes, check.
We had one mic yesterday, we just passed it back and forth, so we're good. We got it down. So I'm from far, far away. I grew up in the Episcopal Diocese of South Dakota, where it is 10 below in the winter, and I am thrilled to be living here in Hawaii now. My family and I lived across the street from our Episcopal church. I was baptized at 2 weeks old, so I'm a cradle Episcopalian. And being across the street from the church meant that we were able to give the key to absolutely anyone who needed to get in, the UPS guy, the letter carrier, somebody who had a casserole under her arm, the altar guild member who forgot her key. My mom was a longtime secretary of the church, my dad was a senior warden, the junior warden, the Holy Advent wreath, etc., etc. So it was an amazing and wonderful and safe and loving environment to grow up in the Episcopal Church there. And I wanted to share that sort of picture for you of where I grew up, and in one other one, which I mentioned in one of the essays that I wrote that you might have seen online, and that is the camp and conference center of the Diocese of South Dakota, which is Thunderhead Episcopal Camp. I went for the first time when I was 11, and together with my Lakota brothers and sisters, we rode in vans across the state of South Dakota out to Hasapa, the Black Hills of South Dakota, where our camp was, and I was there week after week, summer after summer, as a camper and then a counselor and a program director. And it was really a profound experience, not only of the holy, but also of multicultural experience. Given that lots of us who were from the cities around South Dakota and the congregations that we served in did not often have a chance to meet and be with kids from our native indigenous culture there. So that was incredibly profound, and that has stayed with me for quite some time. When I finished high school, I moved to the East Coast. That was another cultural adjustment for me, from a town of 14,000 to a city of many millions. And it was like a candy store for intellectual ideas. And I learned a lot, but it was also kind of scary and frightening for an 18-year-old. But found solace in the Episcopal chaplaincy at my college and in a number of opportunities I had to visit around Boston, other denominations that I hadn't really visited before. I always say we sometimes don't get out much and see our brothers and sisters in Christ, and so that was a wonderful opportunity at that time in my life. It was during those years that I discerned a call to ordination, and I was blessed to be ordained by the first woman bishop in the Anglican Communion, the late Reverend Barbara Harris, and I carry her memory with me at all times as I remember her irreverence, her delightfulness, and her incredible smartness as it comes to leadership in the church. After I was ordained, I served in a number of different capacities in the Diocese of Massachusetts, which is where I went to college. And among those, I think most relevant for this conversation and for your information was my time as the canon for congregations in our bishop's office. I served for 7 years with Bishop Tom Shaw and then Bishop Alan Gates, who followed Bishop Shaw, who ordained me to the priesthood. And in that role, I was really called upon to help congregations with whatever was going on. So we placed clergy, interims, priests in charge, vicars and chaplains, and assisted congregations with their searches. We assisted with property matters, with financial matters, and anything that had to do with formation, education, and grants making. It was a really big operation. It's a large diocese with 160 congregations, so we had a pretty large staff and a good number of volunteers, but it was amazing. I see that my, I think, half minute is about to come up, so I just wanted to share the reality that I can't in 5 minutes share who I am and what my vision is, but we spent a lot of time yesterday inviting folks and encouraging you to ask us specific questions about vision, which is what I certainly find is the most, perhaps the most important part of what we do today. So I am very glad to be here, glad to share a little bit more about Holy Nativity and how I got to Hawaii, but I want to make sure to respect time and give my colleagues their 5 minutes.
Thank you. Let's start time and I do next.
Thanks, Luke. Well, hi, friends. Hello. I am absolutely thrilled to be here, one, and two, delighted to see all of you here in Good Shepherd. I come into these spaces and I'm surrounded by this gorgeous, gorgeous stained glass, and oftentimes when I get into a new place, one of the things I like to do is to walk around the property to get a feel of where I am, and as I walk around this property, I'm always attracted to that olive tree that we have out in front. I love how I stand in front of it and I can sense the rootedness of that tree. And it speaks to our faith, this sense of being rooted deeply into a tradition. And yet the gnarly branches reach up and stretch up into the sky, reaching for the ineffable. And so I came in this afternoon and I stood in front of that tree and felt the breeze and saw the chickens and the roosters running around, and it was absolutely delightful, I believe, to experience that moment. You know, this morning when I was walking my dog, and I started thinking about week and being here this afternoon with all of you, this story came up in my head, and it's from when I was a child. I was a young kid. I must have been only about 6th grade. I was in the 6th grade, and about 12 years old, and I was in the Boy Scouts. And as Boy Scouts, we would have summer camp every summer, right? And usually, being from Oahu, we would have it on the North Shore. Yeah. But this one summer, we had it at Camp Malakio here on Maui. And this was thrilling. Can you imagine a 6th grader, 12 years old, jumping on a plane away from mom and dad, heading off with your friends to go to Boy Scout camp? And so it was this experience that I have deep memories of. And so one of the things that they had us do at this camp was they hiked us down one evening, well, late afternoon, hiked us down into a valley. And as we got deeper into the valley, you know, one by one, like, okay, you, and then you'd stop and drop off your things, and we'd walk a little bit more, okay, you dropped off, you dropped off. And then finally it was me, and I got dropped off by myself in this valley. And so we had to make it overnight, right? We had dinner, they packed us this foil pack with hamburger in it, and I don't know, there was no refrigeration, so hopefully, I didn't get sick. But anyway, we had to make a fire and all this, right? And sure enough, it started getting darker and darker. And I was kind of getting into a panic. Like, what am I going to do? I get this fire started. And finally, I got the fire started. I was able to put my pack on it. But I had never experienced that kind of darkness in my life, being somebody from Hawaii. And what it did for me, when I remembered this story this morning, this experience of coming into this place of darkness, kind of reminded me of this kind of transition moment our diocese is in. This liminal space, this liminal time between what we know now and to what's going to be. And I just held that in my heart this morning as I was walking. And it tells a little bit of why I feel called to this episcopacy at this time. Is that we as a diocese, after almost 20 years of steady leadership from Bishop Bob, are going through a tremendous amount of transition. And I feel that my wide sense of my lived experiences, from education to nonprofits to serving at a diocesan level and administratively at large institutions, equip me to help us as a diocese to move forward together in this liminal time. To develop that sense of relationality is part of my hope with this time that we have. And I think for me that's tremendously foundational. This sense of developing a sense of relationality to know one another. Because as we venture into this darkness, we've got to do it together. And I hope that today, as we share stories and we get to know each other a little better, we can to share more about how I feel so, deeply in love with this diocese. And so as we were camping, I got to end the story with this. As we were camping overnight, the clouds had parted overnight, and I had experienced something I never did as a kid from Honolulu. This blanket of stars just appeared over me, and it was the most glorious thing I've ever seen. I didn't feel so alone in the darkness anymore. It's a reminder for us as people of faith, as we move into this dark, transitional, liminal time, that we can always get a sense of God's presence among us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And it's a pleasure to be able to say aloha to you. And thank you so much for your generous welcome and your hospitality. It's kind of a big trip for us to come here from Arizona, so we appreciate that you have invited us to be part of this journey. It's really the honor of my life to be considered for this very important call, this very important role. I bring with me a lot of experience, vast experience within ministry. I've been a hospital chaplain for a number of years. I served as a chaplain at San Quentin Prison, including with inmates on death row. I've been an elementary school teacher, a camp chaplain, a parish priest. I bring a wide variety of ministry with me, and all of those have impacted my life in tremendous ways. I like to consider myself a lifelong learner, and I like to learn from people, from you. I want to hear your stories and what is important to you, what makes you tick. That is, to me, what ministry is all about. And once I have that information, I like to make sure that I empower you and lift you up and celebrate you for the wonderful person who God made you to be. When I carefully reviewed the diocesan profile that you have published, it jumped out at me and it tugged at the deepest part of my soul. And I read it as if it were written specifically to me. It read to me as if it wasn't looking for me, but it was looking for somebody more like me than I am. That's how the profile is. Otherwise, I would not have any interest in pursuing the Episcopal. I've never had a purple aloha shirt envy. I'll put it that way. I came to the Episcopal Church as a seeker because I'm a Matthew 25 Christian. I remember when Sister Raquel taught us about Matthew 25, how we treat Jesus, how we treat others is how we would be treating Jesus in this members of the church. And that has really informed my ministry. And it informed my decision to seek the Episcopal Church. I needed to be in a place where that was welcome and invited and encouraged, that kind of questioning and seeking and even doubting from time to time with healthy reasons. And there are many, many seekers who are seeking what we have as Episcopalians. I have this thing that I like to say, that the Episcopal Church is the best kept secret in Christianity, but we need to spoil the secret. We want to spread the good news and get the word out about who we are and what it is that brings people to our faith tradition. Because people will find us if we get the word out. I have learned to try ways to do that. I have a voice that is amplified. I've been able to amass a following of tens of thousands of people on social media and to share the good news of the gospel with people all over the world, all around the world, all across the country, across denominational lines. Every day I get messages of gratitude from people who thank me for bringing to their attention this way of being a Christian that is very different from the way that they may have been taught in previous church homes. And I like to follow the examples of some of my heroes, like Greg Boyle, Mary Ann Buddy, Sister Helen Frazier, who are truth tellers. And they demonstrate such courage. And I try to model that courage and to try to tell the truth, even at sometimes potential cost to myself. There was somebody pretty important who said, what does it profit someone to gain the world but to lose their soul? to share the good news, to share the important messages of the gospel. I have tremendous visibility with my social media presence, and that can serve as a bridge between these islands and the rest of the Episcopal Church, a way of communicating what it is that is happening here in these wonderful islands, with all of the wonderful people who occupy these islands, and to share that message with the wider church, beyond denominational lines, and to highlight what it is that our church and our diocese is all about. LGBTQ inclusion, creation care, racial justice, gender equality. And so it is an honor to be considered. I'm happy to be here with you, and this is a journey that has changed me and enhanced my ministry for the better, and I appreciate even the opportunity to be here with you today.
Okay, now we're going to move into the question and answer. Let me give you some guidelines before we get started. Keep in mind that when you ask your question, we'd like you to ask questions that all the candidates can answer. We're going to rotate the order in which the candidates answer the questions, and we would request that the candidates limit their answers to no more than 3 minutes per question. Again, we remind you about the rules of conduct that I talked about earlier. And we're going to alternate between questions for people that are here in person and for questions that we have online and virtual. For those who are online, yesterday's phone number is not the one we're using today, so let me give you that number again. The phone number is 872-233-8422. Again, that's 872-233-8422. So to get started, let me just ask the panel, what's your favorite non-Christian holiday and why? And you can decide who goes first. No one's reaching for that mic, so yeah, go ahead.
So, the other half of my family is Jewish, so we have lots of cool holidays in that tradition. And I think my favorite one is Passover, which we have just come through, which coincides with Holy Week. And during Passover, we usually have in Hawaii my in-laws, Stanley and Clarice, who live in Portland, Oregon, and we get to have all the amazing food. So there is a years-long matzo ball soup. There are, there are kugel recipes. There's all kinds of meat dishes. We have salmon. We have all kinds of weird desserts. There's a thing called matzo crack, which is chocolate and matzah and brown sugar, and it's totally amazing. And there is worship and a story of Jews coming out of Egypt, out of slavery into the wilderness, into, a period of 40 years of a little bit of chaos, right, and challenge and complaining, as we know from the book of Exodus, but also eventually to the promised land, to that land which is filled with milk and honey, which God has called the people to. And so there's a celebration liturgically in my family as well as gastronomically in my family. And I'm really remiss if I just didn't jump in with the microphone and share about that part of my family.
I will have to say, I can run through the files here, but I have to say that for me, it's Boys' Day, which is Children's Day nowadays, and it just brings back such memories of my childhood where, you'd be walking through the neighborhood and there'd be the koi flapping in the wind, and whenever I come here to Good Shepherd, I get to stare at that beautiful window on the side of there with the koi nobori floating in the wind, and it just brings back fond memories of that time, your family taking out and getting excited of putting up the stand for it, and each male in the family had a koi of their own. And even when my son was a little boy, he would take out his koi and fly it through the air, And even when we went away to Virginia, we would do that as well. And you know, it was a really kind of cool thing that people could see it all the way on the East Coast. Like my son, the little guy standing in front of this point, smiling, so that we could send pictures back to Granny. And she would be like, yeah, okay, great, you guys are holding on to some traditions there. But that one for me is the one that speaks to my heart most as far as non-Christian holidays. Thanks.
My answer is one that has changed over the years. Having studied to become a chaplain, I had to do a lot of family systems theory. And if you're familiar with family systems theory, and you know that Thanksgiving is the day of the year when all of that dysfunction comes out of families. So because of that, I've always had a hard time with Thanksgiving. That eventually shifted because I had the opportunity when I was serving at the hospital to spend Thanksgiving with the nurses there who were serving the community by taking care of people who needed healing. Unfortunately, you can't take holidays from being sick, and that means that nurses and doctors and hospitals, they're staffed. Right? And so spending time on Thanksgiving with the nurses changed my perspective of that. And then entering parish ministry and having Thanksgiving meals with the parish and inviting people from the community who don't have anywhere to go, anyone to spend time with, inviting them in to come and share a meal together has been remarkably rewarding and a tremendous blessing. And a big piece of that is the idea of being companions. The word companion comes from Latin. Com means with, and panis means bread, to break bread with. And so Thanksgiving gives us a real opportunity to break bread with one another and to build companionship with each other. And because of that, I've had a change of heart about my feelings about the Thanksgiving holiday. It's a wonderful day to not only offer gratitude for the blessings we have, but also to share that companionship with others in our world.
All right, thank you. Do we have an online question first? And if you're here in person and you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll ask you to come up to the mic right after this question.
Hi, yes, we do. So our first question today is from Episcopal and Holy Apostles and Philo. What ideas do you see in expanding the ministry potentialities of our camp locally?
Why don't we start with Cameron and Andrew this one?
Thank you again, Yvette. Good to hear from you again today. Hey, Capital Media. And I know they're going through a recovery period right now, as are the flooding on the North Shore of Oahu took some of its toll on that site. That area is such an interesting place for us to investigate as a community. You know, it's right along the shorelines. We know climate change and rising sea levels are a reality, and that within a few decades, the landscape of that area is going to be completely different. Question at hand is that the camp has about 10 acres on the other side of the road. We want to develop those kind of areas. How can this place best serve our diocese and the wider community? You know, so thoughts around creating an actual retreat center there where groups can come and have moments of restoration that we all get to experience from our diocese. Groups like, I know there was interest from places as far away as the East Coast where groups like Shalem, who does spiritual direction, would come and run a retreat for folks. I know that there are opportunities for folks, even in the secular world, looking for places to have their opportunities to be together as a community there. And I think it speaks to a larger sense of who we are as a church and who we need to be in the sense of being being willing to go out there into the world where people are, where they are functioning. So whether it's a corporate organization that wants to use their organization, that place can be the presence of God and presence of Christ in that moment, just by its existence, just by the history of that place and what it is and what it stands for, and the years of people embedding their joy in being a Christian community. And that would be a good way for us to move forward, possibly, with the movie.
All right, when we have
Thank you for that question. Camp is one of the special things that we have to offer as a denomination. Almost every diocese has a camp presence, and part of my role as director required me to take some time and be a chaplain at our camp in Arizona, which is not something that I ever had the experience of before. And so when I went for the first time, I thought, well, I may as well do what it is that I'm supposed to do and be with the kids, right? And so what I discovered is that the things that I was doing were things that other chaplains hadn't been doing. Going on the hikes with the kids, playing on the ropes course with the kids, climbing the rock wall and doing the zip line with the kids. And what that did was build tremendous trust with the campers. And to the extent where now I'm essentially obligated to return to camp. They basically have an open, it's not even an expectation anymore, it's kind of a demand that I go and serve as chaplain. So I think that's something that we want to continue to foster, including, it's not, I don't see it as fair or reasonable to ask others to do things that I'm not willing to do myself. And so I think a ministry of presence can go a tremendous way, being present and participating and having some fun with the campers and the staff and encouraging others within the diocese to do the same, to promote the camp environment, the camp worship, the camp experience, to extend beyond just the Episcopal Church into the wider community, because that raises that companionship with others and enhances the relationship. So those are some of the ways that I would like to see that important ministry continue to flourish here in the Diocese of Hawaii.
Well, as Tim mentioned, camp is incredibly important in the formation of our young people. It has been shown by research on young adults and even older adults that incredibly important formation in their faith tradition happened as a result of being at camp. I've shared already about Winterhead Episcopal Camp, which was in that role in my own life, and I've tried to continue my support at Camp Mokuleia by serving as a chaplain now and again for some of the staycays over the weekends, and also for the last 2 summers during the Ho'omana, which is a camp for adults with neurological disabilities of various kinds, Down syndrome and the like. And I think Andrew's talking about this year. He'll be at Ho'omana with that good crew this coming summer. So no doubt in my mind that it is one of the most important ministries in our diocese. And so the question then is, how do we strengthen it? I spent a couple of years doing strategic planning for the Episcopal Church Foundation out of New York, working with dioceses and parishes, and learning about strategic planning from the folks who do it incredibly well there. And what I think the most important steps are 3: relationship building, setting the vision, and then finding the resources. And I helped some congregations with that and some dioceses with that in that work through ECF. And I tried to work with our team at Holy Nativity Church to do that as well. And I'm glad to share that answer or some more information about that in another question. But with regard to planning and visioning and supporting an institution or an idea or a movement, those 3 steps are critical. Now, I think relationships are a place where we are in really good shape at Camp Mokuleia. Everybody knows Camp Mokuleia. Folks send people to Camp Mokuleia. our clergy go to Camp Mobley. We have retreats and conference opportunities there, and I feel like there is a very strong feeling over many decades about the positive nature of the experience at the camp on folks of really of all ages, but especially the young people. So where we really are, I think, around Yvette's question is how do we develop a strategy? What are those things that we actually do want to do? Do we want to do retreats? Do we want to double the size of camp? Do we want to build? What kinds of things are the most helpful in terms of formation for our young folks? Do we need to go younger? The list of possibilities is very long, and the question is how do we gather the leadership from the staff, from the board, and from congregations, and from our diocesan staff? How do we gather that group of people and do a strategic planning process so we're really clear about what the things are that we want to build and what we want to fund? And the last step is we need to find those funds. I believe that Cambodia has been either starting or started a capital campaign a little bit ago, but it is incredible to me in this diocese how generous people are and willing to open their wallets and hearts to serve, to build in churches around the diocese and in ministries that they care about. So we just need to find those folks, and it could be a wonderful adventure.
Jasper to help you with this. Can you grab the mic and take it to the young woman rather than have her come up there?
Thank you. Opportunity to ask a question. My name is Elizabeth Wojcicki, and I am a delegate and a member of John's in Canada. My question is, Presiding Bishop Sean Rowe's call to action urged the Church to prioritize the marginalized and serve as a moral force for justice. He stated that the Episcopal Church must act as an engine of resistance. My question is, in what ways would you support and lead this diocese into living into this plan? Thank you.
All right, why don't we start with Father Timmons?
Thank you. As I mentioned here, I consider myself a Matthew 25 Christian. Matthew 25, of course, says, whenever you did it to the least of those who are members of my family, you did it to me. How we treat others is how we treat Jesus. And as Christians, we have a responsibility to live into that. And as faith leaders, it is important that we are visible and we are vocalizing what it is that are expected of followers of Jesus. Sometimes what is expected of followers of Jesus is not necessarily what might be popular in our communities or even within our parishes. But at the same time, when someone in a position of leadership and authority speaks, it gives permission and guidance to others to follow and to do the same. And so I have been vocal about some of the causes where I see that people are being treated poorly in this country. I have been very vocal about that, and I encourage my colleagues to do the same. But at the same time, I took a lot of relief when I saw our bishop, Bishop Jennifer, saying some of the same things. Right? It empowered me. It encouraged me. And as bishop, that's an important role, is to lead by example, but also to empower and to raise up others to do the ministry that you are called to do. Right? And that's not just clergy, that's laity as well. As baptized Christians, you are the ministers of the church, and I would expect that as ministers of the church that you would follow the teachings of Jesus and honor those teachings of Jesus, and especially when it comes to speaking up on behalf of those who are even the least of the members of the body of Christ.
Bishop Rose, Presiding Bishop Rose letters you were mentioning there, but what really has moved me is the letter signed by 154 bishops in the Episcopal Church, where we were called upon. They said, we can't mandate or tell you what to do, but we ask you to act your conscience. And I have never heard from bishops in the Episcopal Church a stronger mandate for action. It was incredibly encouraging to me, and it helped us at Holy Nativity to step out and try to do something about what's going on in our nation that is unjust, inhumane, and we could go on. In our congregation, we invite a lot of people to preach. Lay folks preach, clergy preach, and we had preached, I think, as a crew, bravely around these issues of justice seeking, around caring for those who were at the margins. And while one could name all kinds of groups that were at the margins, where our congregation kind of got our energy and got our mojo once we saw that letter from the 154 bishops, was around immigration and protecting those folks from being detained who should not be detained, protecting folks who were detained by finding their families and caring for their families, and being involved in the No Dictators rally on March 28th. And so we have gathered 15 or so folks who, so interestingly, would not gather at coffee hour by themselves, but when we called it Justice Circle, folks who didn't even really know each other, but who came together because of commitment around justice work and protecting those who were marginalized and standing up for justice and peace, came together immediately. So the No Dictators rally, as you might remember, was the day before Palm Sunday. So we had water bottles and we had palm crosses. We said we have regular water, we also have living water, because the lessons from John that week had to do with the Samaritan woman at the well. And we were disrupted somewhat because of the bomb threat, which didn't turn out to be real, but which we needed to take seriously, of course. And so we weren't as successful with the original mission that we wanted to be, but we were very successful sort of gathering ourselves and feeling like we were actively doing something. And that is what I think that the bishop, whoever he or she is coming up, needs to do. It was that feeling of moving from care and preaching and word into action, which felt very powerful for us.
Thank you for this question. I'm so grateful to have a reminder about Bishop Rose's call to us to seek to uplift those from the margins. And I truly, this one really speaks to my heart. And you mentioned earlier about relationality, relationship as being one of the major points of that structure. And I do truly believe that we as a diocese need to fortify ourselves around this kind of sense of relationality. And part of what I've been able to do in my role with the diocese has been the convener of the Racial Reconciliation Task Force. And as a convener of that task force, we were going to create the Holy Meet program, which is based on the former Archbishop's difference program out of the Church of England, and contextualize it for our place here in Hawaii. And the primary focus of that program was to develop a way for people to learn to communicate with each other, to develop a sense of trust with one another as we move forward to talk about these very challenging and difficult situations that face us here in our own diocese. There's a tremendous amount of work around restoration and reconciliation that needs to happen within our own diocese. And this is one of those things, right? We often pat ourselves on the back and say, hey, we were invited here by the King and Queen, which is true and beautiful and wonderful. And there's a tremendous amount of work that still needs to be done around things like leadership and development. How do we lift up more leaders from the margins? I think part of our job as folks who are in leadership roles is to be able to develop the eye to see those who have these gifts that would bring up more life into our diocese. Because as we know, oftentimes people from the margins are not going to be the ones that say, oh, yeah, pick me. They're going to be the ones sitting back, and they need to be invited in. And so we need to be able to develop that skill to see those moments like, oh, I see something in you. Let's talk about this. And so I think there's a lot of work to be done around that in our diocese, having these challenging and hard conversations around who we are. And I agree with Lydia about the Episcopal and being a presence at these moments of social justice actions. Be a public Christian with a sense of gravitas, of being out there, being at the state capitol, holding a sign. And that kind of thing, if I were elected to be your next bishop, would be a commitment that I would make, that I would show up, I would be a presence in these moments.
Let's do an online question, and then Father Holloway, you can ask the question.
Our next question comes from Lindy Marzo from Holy Apostles in Hilo. How do you balance pastoral care, administration, worship planning, and community leadership? Sorry about that. I'll repeat the question. How do you balance pastoral care, administration, worship planning, and community leadership?
Not well. I think that means pastoral care. Often there's a self-care question. Like people say, well, how do you encourage you folks to take care of yourself? There's a Episcopal church question that always comes up in the profile that we need to answer. But I'm hearing this question being those things that we are to do with folks outside. So pastoral care of folks in our community, administration, planning of worship, and the last thing was, community leadership, right. I think what I would say is that for me, I lean on the strengths that I have to start with, right? So where is my greatest experience and where do I feel really comfortable? And so that's low-hanging fruit, if you will. And I think administrative work, strategic work, visioning work, as I said, is really exciting for me. I think that's how I ended up being called to Church of the Holy Nativity, how I ended up going to Hawaii. And so that's very comfortable for me. And then I love pastoral care. It feels like really the balancing of that, to be present with people sort of in their most intimate moments. People say, thank you for coming to the hospital, or thank you so much for what you said at my uncle's funeral. And I say, no, it is an extreme privilege to be a part of, to be invited into your ohana at these incredibly sensitive and delicate moments. And so I have a colleague who says it's so important to do the things that we love, that nourish us, to do the things that are harder. And so I think I try to very often go between pastoral care, or in our case, care of Keiki. We have 135 kids in our Episcopal elementary school. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like a second grader or first grader to lift up your heart when you're having a hard time with, anything from a lawsuit to a budget crisis. So if you ever need to be lifted up, just go get a first grader. Anyway, so going back and forth between pastoral care of various kinds and administration of various kinds is incredibly nourishing to me, and I love the variety. Now, I have been asked as part of the process, as these guys have too, what are your strengths and what are the places where you need to grow? That word that really means weaknesses. And I think for me, I mentioned one yesterday, which is no secret, which is that I'm not so great with social media and websites and like all that technical stuff. But the other one that I wrote down is being a more courageous public witness. And so what I'd like to say is and I'll just claim this, that I have less often than I would be proud to say, gotten out there and done that action piece that I talked about as the answer to the last question. And I look forward to, even though it's hard to name those things that we have to grow and develop into, it is really important to name them and get better at them. So what I would like to do is pledge that I will and I aim to, regardless of where I'm sitting next year.
Thank you, Wendy, for this question. And I'm going to answer by just saying this, and I'm going to say more, that it's all pastoral care. It's all pastoral care. The bishop is called to be the chief pastor, one diocese. And I believe that whatever role we move into, whether it's as administrator, whether it's outreach into the community, we never take off that pastoral hat. It's like this kind of Pauline theology around be joyful when they're joyful, weep while they're weeping. And so to be with people, to be present to folks, adds that pastoral presence. Now I think about when I served as the dean of the lower school at Illinois School, and there were a tremendous amount of times as an administrator that the situations were incredibly pastoral. Having to discipline a faculty member and sit with them and be a presence where they could learn and grow and not just be punished for what they have done. To actually have to release somebody from their position, and how do you help them beyond that, is also a pastoral role that we take on. So I do believe that whatever we are doing, whatever we're called into doing, whether it's administration, whether it's moving out into the community, into community leadership, whether it is clergy discipline, it's always done with that pastoral hat. Because we are people who are deeply embedded into the sense of restoration and reconciliation, even if it's a hard thing that we need to move into, like clergy discipline, like having to release somebody from an institution. That we always want to be that embodiment of Christ's presence in all that we do.
Thank you for another excellent and very important question. Ms. Kennedy said, pastoral care is kind of the root of all that we do as clergy. And one of the ways that I am learning to navigate those areas of balance is by practicing what I like to call the ministry of getting out of the way. And what do I mean by that? Well, as a priest, I have been trained to do every ministry that is needed to be done in the church. Anything from altar guild to lector, to Eucharistic minister, to sexton, any role in the church I can do as a priest. But if I do everything, I am not effectively leading the congregation in worship. And what that means is I need to empower people to participate in those areas. I need to encourage you to do what it is that you are called to do, even if it means that you might be a little anxious. Where do I stand with the candle? And if the answer is it doesn't matter, how about there? Because if you do something liturgically, if you do it with intention, then that's really the important thing. So modeling that ability to be in a non-anxious presence, the least anxious, I guess let's be honest, there's no such thing as non-anxious, but the least anxious presence is such an important role to model, because then that encourages everyone else to do what it is that you are called to do. And when it comes to pastoral care, that opens the door for that. That opens the door for those pastoral conversations. And it builds trust, it builds companionship, and you know that when you have a really good pastoral care conversation with someone is when they'll sigh. Gee, I've never shared that with anyone before. When someone says that, you know you're on holy ground. And so by encouraging and empowering people to live into your baptismal role, your call as a minister of Jesus Christ, I hope to encourage to promote that trust, to promote that vulnerability, and to model that myself, and to use the gifts that God has given us collectively. And when we do those things, we really can mitigate that anxiety, and we can do the work that we're called to do, which ultimately is to serve and to worship and to love Jesus Christ and our neighbors more fully.
Father, before you ask your question, let me note that until we have or 3 questions before we go to the next segment of this program. So go ahead, Father Holy.
Vinina aloha. Obangno Haui Tomoso, Presbyter of the Diocese. And I'm also a member of Na Leo o Na O'iwi, the Native Hawaiian ministry here in this place, this diocese. So I'm here representative of all of the members, all of the aha of Na Leo o Na O'iwi. I want to ask you a couple of questions, and I believe these questions are being asked at every venue in the diocese. 1, their majesties of happy memory, King Kamehameha IV and Queen Emakalele Onanani, as indigenous sovereign rulers, originally invited the church, the Anglican Church, into the kingdom to minister amongst the people of the kingdom. Today, however, indigenous members of the church make up a distinct minority within the church. What specific steps would you take to increase the presence of O'iwi, of the host culture, in the prayer, worship, and meetings, the aha of this diocese? Should I ask the second question because it follows up, or just stop it at that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Number 2, Olelo Hawaiʻi. The Hawaiian language is, by our state constitution, an official language of this state. Olelo Hawaiʻi is official. How will you promote the use of Olelo Hawaiʻi, our dear Hawaiian language, in all of our liturgies, rites, and other places of gathering here in this diocese? Mahalo.
All right, why don't we start with Father Tim?
Wonderful, thank you. Very, very important question. Something that is one of those things that we have to navigate in this diocese and quite frankly across the Episcopal Church. It's although here, of course, it's in a very specific context. And one of the things that to me is important is to embrace that culture and to acknowledge the history of the culture of the people who inhabited these islands for generations. And my role in that, what I see, is doing a whole lot of listening. Because I don't know what it is that I don't know. And I'm just a goofy guy from Arizona. I don't think it's fair for me to come in and impose anything on people here, but at the same time, it's important to receive those stories. What kinds of customs, what kinds of culture are important to people of Hawaiian ancestry? What is important to people here on the islands, and then what can we do together to raise those things up? You know, liturgically speaking, I have a policy that I kind of follow that says if it's not prohibited in the prayer book, then that means it's fair game. And so what that means is incorporating, continuing to incorporate, because I know that it happens, but in continuing to incorporate and to encourage liturgical practices that come from Hawaiian culture. And an example of how I do that is at St. John's we have a practice of blowing bubbles during baptism. A little girl came to me and said, "Can we blow bubbles?" And I said, "Well, yeah, why not? It doesn't say we can't in the prayer book, so now every time we have a baptism, we blow bubbles." Right? That's an example of how we can incorporate some of those things. As far as the Hawaiian language is concerned, one of the things that I've actually thought very seriously about, and if I were to be selected to be your bishop, is to immerse myself in Hawaiian language courses and classes so that I can learn for myself those things that I don't know. Because it's very important not only to speak authoritatively as a bishop, but also to listen to the needs of the people who are being served. And so that is my commitment, to respect the culture, to learn about the culture as much as I can, and to work together to provide what it is that is communicated to me that is needed, was the last word that I said.
All right. Mother Debbie?
He said several times that the important word for those of us who are not Hawaiian and who do not come from here is that we need to listen and learn. And I know that Bishop Bob Fitzpatrick has often said, I've heard him maybe a dozen times say how incredibly important it has been for him in his ministry to be listening to people who are from here, who have that history, who have that language, who have the experience of generations and generations of caring for the Aina, and of caring for one another, and having also the experience of difficulty and having land taken from them, and language and culture and songs taken from them. There is a bit of a renaissance, is my understanding, since maybe the 1970s, but so much reconciliation work to be done. And those of us who are not Hawaiian must listen and learn. As you probably discovered by now, I'm a person of action, and it's one thing to say things, and it's really important to talk about how we are going to actually do them. And I think in terms of action around this, it's important for the bishop to, within the staff of the diocesan staff, to make sure that there's intentionality in staffing to match the population that we have around it, and particularly with respect for Hawaiian culture and for Olo. One of the things I mentioned yesterday was the ordination process. Who is in our ordination process? How do they hear about the possibility of being ordained? How are they formed? How are folks who are not Hawaiian formed in the ordination process? So for us to have intentionality about that as well. And really importantly, I come to the keiki again and again and again. The keiki who enlighten us and delight us when we're sad. The keiki who need Camp Mokalea for formation. And I wonder, who is it, how is it that we are equipping our young Hawaiians in particular, those folks who are going to grow up into being high school students and college students and professional folks and ordained folks? Are we offering, what kinds of opportunities for those folks are we offering? I wonder about our public schools. On Oahu, I know that 42% of our students go to independent schools, and I am working at one of those independent schools, and others of us are associated with them. It's not that they are bad, but what are we doing within those independent schools around scholarship and around curriculum building for keiki? So that is an issue, the education piece and the equipping piece and the empowering piece around our youngest ones across the islands, I think is probably one of my primary concerns, and something that I would really, really focus on. The last thing I want to say is, as important as Hawaiian olelo and culture and history are, so are the stories of folks who have come after the Hawaiians. So the Japanese folks, the Chinese folks, the Filipino folks, the Micronesian folks, where are they in our stories, and how do we bring them along?
Thank you. Holy, thank you for this question. This is one that sits deep in my heart, and I have, as I speak to you about it, I come speaking as an Asian settler. I'm not Kanapoi'i, so I come with that humility into this. And I think, as I said earlier, it's beautiful that Na'ali'i invited the Anglican Church into Hawaii, and that we have that. I think oftentimes that's used as a pass by our denominations, saying, oh, good job, look at us, we were invited. But there is a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done on restoration and reconciliation. I often think about, I mentioned this when we were on Hawaii, I mentioned it here, that Anglicanism at its finest is an ongoing conversation within its context. Here in the Diocese of Hawaii, that conversation has been dominated by other voices, rather than Kanapoi'i. And we are at a place in the life of our diocese where this sense of moving and uplifting Kanako Iwi voices, Kanako Iwi leadership has to go beyond lip service. It has to truly be who we are, and we need to think about ways of how we're forming our leaders. As was mentioned, we have Waimolagi Hui'ia, which I'm the dean of, and I put forward a proposal for 2027 to re-establish that program, to contextualize ordination process towards what we have in our context here in Hawaii. I also believe that we need to go beyond. We have all of these lists. It was on our profile. You know, we have Mana and Kuriana and all of that. And a very brilliant Kanako Iwi clergy once told me, sitting there in the corner, that really we need to move beyond this kind of checklist sense about what we're doing with Hawaiian values, and we need to be able to embody a natural Hawaiian worldview. How do we do that? Is a good question for us to begin. How do we center Kanako Iwi voices? And as I agree, there's many other stories here in Hawaii, and all of those other stories were built on this colonial structure that has truly, over the decades, centuries, marginalized Kanako Iwi people. And so that needs to be addressed. As far as Hawaii, my one thing, and almost out of time, is however we do it, we need to do it well. There's an Ololo'eau that says, in the word there is life, in the word there is death. Language is vital, and it must be done well, and not just ornamental, if we add it into our liturgies and into our services.
Let's take one final question online, and then we'll go into 3-minute remarks and closing for Mr. Jones.
Our last question from online is from Brianna Roberts of Holy Innocents. What gives you the most hope when you think about the future of our diocese?
All right, let me start with Ken.
Thank you, Leon. It's good to hear your name being called out in this forum. There's so many things that give me hope. And I often feel like, especially, I love Oahu. I grew up on Oahu. And it's coming to places like Maui. We were on Kauai yesterday. And there is just such a still sense of a deep sense of community. And I think the rest of our diocese can learn a tremendous amount from those examples that we get of these places still remaining as a community hub and as a place to gather, as a place to live more fully into our lives as followers of Christ, to be a presence of Christ to our communities. People drive by it, look at this main street that passes right in front of us, and they see this presence. And that's hopeful. My hope is in the sense and the knowing that the church will not die. We get all these dour numbers and dark forecasts about what's happening, but there's a tremendous amount of beautiful things that are happening right here in our places and that we don't hear about enough. There's so many wonderful initiatives happening in the wider church. Right? The church is not dying. The church is going to need to shift and change and grow. And that excites me. That gives me hope for all that we're doing. And all of you here on a Friday afternoon, sitting here, that gives me hope. And so I appreciate Leanna's question, and I will pass on the mic to...
When I think of the Diocese of Hawaii, I think of a diocese that is in the forefront of what it is to be the church in the world. It's a diocese that has that's built into your DNA, being the presence of Christ in the world. And my hope and encouragement is that continues, because it's something to be built upon. I mentioned that the church, is changing, right? And if we embrace that change with seekers and invite those seekers in and welcome those seekers, right? That we will continue to grow and to thrive, right? And it also requires us to kind of change our mindset a little bit. Right? One of the things that we want to change our mindset about is the hierarchical nature of the church. Professor J. Daniel taught that the ministry model needs to be flipped on its head. Right? Instead of having the bishop at the top, and then priests, and then deacons, and then laity need to be at the top. Deacons, and then priests, and then the bishop. The people need to be empowered to do the ministry, the work that you're called to do. That also means we shift our way of thinking about what it means to be a successful diocese. Right? The days of average Sunday attendance may not mean much anymore. And what I mean by saying that is because I have a lot of people who now come to St. John's who are very committed to the community, who don't come every week because they don't have a custom of attending church every week. Right? They may come once a month, twice a month, 3 weeks on, 3 weeks off, something like that. But they're very committed. And so getting away from that vocabulary of average Sunday attendance being our important marker of how many people we have in our community, right? We need to open our minds a little bit to expand on that. And try innovative things. For instance, finances are always a concern, right? But there are ways to make it easier for people to give. And people will give if we make it easier to do so. One of the things we implemented at St. John's was QR codes. And in the first 2 months of putting QR codes in the pew pockets, right, that accounted for $11,000 in donations. Because people don't carry cash or checks. But they will be generous if they have a means of doing that. So what I see as a means of hope is to continue to be that front-running presence in the Episcopal Church, and to be a diocese where people will say, the Diocese of Hawaii, we want to be like them. We want to be like the Diocese of Hawaii, a beacon of hope and of love and of that spirit of Allah.
Sort of sad when Gilbert said that we have time for only one more question, because I feel like there are so many things that we could talk about. And I'm very glad that there's a session 2. I think Sharon was set up in a particular way that suggests that we might be able to go on and have some more conversation, which I would welcome very much. I think one of the things that gives me hope, and Father Tim mentioned this, is the gatherings that we have been to and that we are looking forward to this week. It is easy to be church and to come on Sundays and to be comfortable in our pews and comfortable with our liturgy. And what we have been talking about for the last 2 days, and which I think we'll continue to be talking about, is things that are hard to think about, things that involve change and innovation. And what gives me a great deal of hope is the quality of dialogue that we had yesterday and that we are continuing to have today, and that gives me hope that we will continue to have it over the next couple of days as we move on to our other islands. We have had questions about Guam and Saipan. We have had questions about Kitmokalai'io. We have had questions about reconciliation and Hawaiian history. Yesterday we had questions about large language models and AI. We've had questions about growth and change. And what I notice is the questions are smart, the questions are thoughtful, and folks are not afraid to take that step into the future. And that is what gives me the most hope. I invite each of you to think about moments of what I call good church. That it could be, I'll go home from a vestry meeting, or I'll go home from pizza church for our young families, or I'll go home from Sunday service where somebody preached an amazing sermon, and I'll say, man, that was good church. We all have moments of good church, and so what I think we need to do, if we want to be hopeful, is hang on to those moments of good church, whatever they are, and say, hold on to those and move into the future. And I thank you all for being here, for being smart and thoughtful and fearless, standing and walking in the footsteps of Jesus as we take his church to the next decade.
So we'll now have each of the candidates provide 3-minute remarks to close. And we have a timekeeper up front. We'll also try to keep you on course. Following the statements, then we will invite everyone to the parish hall, where there will be refreshments and another opportunity to interact with candidates. So we will start with, let's go backwards.
Once again, I'm going to start by offering my expression of gratitude to you for welcoming me here to participate in this journey. This is a journey that has changed my life. No matter what the outcome is, this journey and this kind of mutual discernment has changed my life and enhanced my life and affected my ministry in ways that I never could have imagined possible. So thank you for that wonderful gift that you have shared with me about welcoming me here to participate. You know, this tug that I mentioned in my heart, it has called me into conversation with you, and it's driven me to something that just felt like not something I wanted to do, but something that I have to do. It wasn't making a choice to do, it was something that was chosen for me. There was a voice that was speaking to me across miles of sea and desert and mountains. And the word for spirit is pneumate in Greek. It's the same word that means wind. You know, the jet stream, it blows from west to east. And the trade winds, as you know, go east to west. Could it be that call arrived to me to discern this on the jet stream and will be answered through the trade winds? You know, God's time is fast. Our time as humans is quite a bit more slowly. I'd be honored to serve as your bishop. I will use my voice and my visibility to raise you up, to encourage you, to empower you, to celebrate you. We will celebrate Jesus together. The whole world will know the joy of the Aloha Spirit that's present here in the Diocese of Hawaii. And so we want to do that. We want to do that too. There's a line from the Disney movie Moana. If the wind in our sails and the sea stays behind us, one day we'll know how far we will go. The wind is the Holy Spirit. And she's filling our sail, running behind us, sending us farther together than we ever imagined in our wildest hopes and dreams. So let's let the Holy Spirit, let's let her guide us, and let's be her vessel. And let's say yes to her call together. And once again, thank you for welcoming me, some goofy guy from Arizona, to discern this call with you, because you have enriched my life by being a piece of it. And I will not forget that. And if you leave here with two things, I want you to leave with these two things. That God loves you, and I love you too. Aloha.
Thanks, man. Thank you, Libby, for this kind of moment together. I've just, again, I want to express, as I did in my opening statement, about how grateful I am to be here on Maui and to be part of this journey, along with Libby and with Tim and with all of you. And the way it's been framed as a holy conversation, it's a really beautiful way for me to think about this, and this whole time that we've been through this, with the time with the search committee, with the time when the slate was announced, that the diocese has always framed this as a discernment process. And that discernment calls us to listen. Listen deeply. Listen deeply to one another. You know, we have time out there to have conversations with one another, to share what's on our hearts. And that's a beautiful thing, because it all allows us to be in deeper relationships with one another. To listen to God, to be in deeper relationship with God, and to have our hearts peeled open at this time. And so I'm just very grateful that we've had this time together. I'm very grateful that I have this opportunity to share a little bit about myself with all of you, and how, when I think about serving here in Hawaii, I think about something that my spiritual director shared with me. He's a former SSJE Benedictine, and he talked about how a long time ago, abbots would put on their gravestones the words Amor Loci, love of place. And as you know, Benedictines, they are rooted in their place. And that speaks deeply to me of how much I love Hawaii, how much I love our diocese, and I'm just so grateful to be able to serve in this place and be with people of just tremendous big hearts and a faith that will move us. You know, we are, Aaron Richardson Severin yesterday called in with this AI question that we talked about. And she one time told me that we, this church, is the antidote for a sick world. And I love that imagery. And we are. And that's another, back to that whole question. Something to be hopeful for. We have something beautiful to offer that world. So thank you. Thank you all.
So clergy are told to be very careful about telling stories about their own children. However, the story that I'm about to tell about my second grade child who is now about to be 26, she knows is a favorite story of mine. So I'm going to share it as we close this part of the program. I was called to a church to assist as the priest in charge after a difficult separation between the priest and the congregation. And I had some conflict resolution training and experience, and so I was called to be the priest in charge there. And I brought our younger daughter, Emily, then who was about 6 or 7, with me. And she was not so happy about leaving Emmanuel Episcopal Church because she had a lot of crew of friends there in Wakefield, and she didn't really want to go with Mom to Medfield. But to go, we went, which is what you need to do. And from job to job or from town to town. So we go into the service, and we are there together, and we're just there visiting because it's not my first Sunday yet. And folks are meeting me, and she's sort of running around. She's comfortable in church, so that's cool. And somebody sent her downstairs with a teenager to say, oh, show Emily the Sunday school room. And so Emily went downstairs with this older girl, and was down there for a while, and I met this person, and I met this person. I said, look forward to next week, we're going to have a great time together. And Emily came racing up the stairs, and she said, guess who's here? And I said, who's here? She said, the Good Shepherd is here. And I said, the Good Shepherd? Yeah, great. And I'm thinking, what's going on here? She said, let me show you. So I come racing down the stairs to see the Good Shepherd. And the Good Shepherd is the godly play, Good Shepherd, that has the grass and the fence and the shepherd and the sheep. And it's the exact same set that she had in Emmanuel in Wakefield, where she came from. So if the Good Shepherd is here, Emily thought, I can be here too. And what I want to say to you is that I came in off the van today. I'm in Hawaii because 3 generations of my family have lived on Oahu, and I've loved Hawaii since I was 10. This is a really different place than I've ever lived in. But let me tell you, when I walked off the van and into the room where we were supposed to put our bags down, the Good Shepherd was right there. And it was the same Good Shepherd in Emmanuel, Wakefield, and Medfield that Emily said made it okay to be there. So anyway, I felt the Good Shepherd was with us as we traveled together over this week. The Good Shepherd has definitely been with you guys as you brought your questions. I'm so grateful. And whether you're a Good Shepherd person or not from this congregation, guess what? It's Good Shepherd Sunday coming up. So let's all enjoy the Good Shepherd, and He's shepherding all of us. Thank you so much.
So this Ke Aloha Kako process continues here on Oahu tomorrow at St. Timothy's in Aiea in the morning, and at the Cathedral St. Andrews in the afternoon. like to attend another session within the next few days, please go to our website, Bishop Transition, the Episcopal Diocese of Hawaiʻi, and sign up for a virtual session. Now, this process will end on Sunday afternoon, and our candidates will return home. In 3 weeks, we will convene a special meeting of convention to elect the 6th Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Hawaiʻi on Saturday, May 16, 2026 at Iolani School in the new Ariaga Student Center dining hall. Delegates are required to register for this event on our website. Check-in and credentials are from 7:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. Convention Eucharist is at 8 a.m. The business meeting will run from 9:30 to 4 p.m., but lunch will be served. After the closing prayer, I want to thank you for your time and your questions and your answers. And shortly we'll be getting some refreshments. And we'll be holding 10-minute group sessions with each of the candidates. I guess that's sort of what people used to call speed dating.
Yeah.
So we'll head to the parish hall, keeping in mind to keep an open seat for one of the candidates in wherever you're sitting. And after getting your refreshments, head to your seats, and each candidate will have 10 minutes on each of your tables. And I think it's not tables, I think it's actually circles in our parish hall, to answer any other questions or to just talk story with you. So at this time, let me call again on Father Naholo Lucas to provide us with our closing prayer and blessing of refreshments and safe travel home for our candidates. So after the prayer, this will end our virtual presentation, and we thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Thank you to Brian Schuster and the others in the transition committee, and all the team members who have been involved in this process. To Father Moki, Mother Amy, Father George, and the other clergy of Maui for your coordinated effort, and much mahalo, and Father Lucas.
Let's bow our heads in prayer. Most gracious and heavenly Father, you have created heaven and earth. We're so very thankful for gathering here today, where we come together as one Ohana, one family, to thank you for the ideas, thoughts that have been discussed here, conversations, great discussions, responses that have been given in this sacred space, beautiful Good Shepherd here in Maui. Yoko, we ask that you bless over us and watch us, especially the candidates, to continue the journey here in Hawaii. Guide them, protect them, give them strength, give them bread for the journey, which they will need always, and keep them safe and keep them whole. Bless all those who could not be here, and hopefully they will be able to get to answer their questions that they have regarding these candidates. This is food that has been prepared, and we will be partaking in soon, helping to nourish our hearts and minds to the needs of others, and guide us and protect us as we make our way home after this event, with our families, friends, and loved ones. Let us remember that you are the God of peace, that your people know. Let us, your people, know, that at the heart of turbulence there is an inner calm that comes from faith in you. Keep us from being content with things as they are. And that from this central peace there may come a creative compassion, a thirst for justice, and a willingness to give of ourselves in the spirit of Christ. Ke nonoi ni mga kuya o ikia ko, we ask all of these things, makaino, of keiki o Jesus Christo, in the blessed name of His Son, Jesus Christ. Ke ali o nali'i, King of all kings, Omako Hakueo, our Redeemer who lives always. Amen.
And that concludes this portion. Again, we invite you, if you can, to join us in the parish hall